survey data. So there was 6 classrooms that we visited, and it goes in order. So if you have your classroom environment sheet over here, you girls did that. The first box, 4 out of the 6 classrooms, 3 out of the 6, 5 out of the 6. And then it seems like these 2 last areas are our strongest as a school. And then it definitely gives us points that we can work towards. Do you mind reading what that second one is so that we can have an idea?
Vocabulary.
Vocabulary.
We're not discussing it yet, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, we were just talking about vocabulary. In our wonderings, we said, because a lot of vocabulary we saw was teacher underlining it in the text. It wasn't necessarily posted or visual. But we were saying now that we're doing closed reads, and it would be very difficult to make a word wall for every closed read you pull out. But she had a good point of maybe visual vocabulary, like pictures, videos that go along with the story.
So I think that is a great idea, because as a team we PLC for ELA, and one of the easiest things we could do is pick at least one word.
Yeah.
One word that we know they might struggle with, or a word that we could easily find a visual that kind of anchors the text. And when she said that, I was like, that's something, a small change we could do during PLCs that really could help our scholars. So I think that was a great point. Anything you wanted to share about, oh, go ahead.
One last thing, I'd like to see, and this is just, I don't know, my opinion, I'd like to see the word walls change from being word walls to the suffixes and the prefixes and the Latin and Greek root words, because those are still words that they can use to attack words that they don't know, that they can use. And because you are often changing and you're using so many stories and you're changing that they can be used and they can be referenced to help them be able to attack a word that they may not know. And so even in high school, I mean, I had created a flip that was, I don't know how many pages it was, but we flipped through them, and that was what they were using at times to be able to attack SAT or ACT words. And so those are things that if we started using those now, that they could definitely help them along the way as well.
And those are in our grammar standards. So I'm going to kind of summarize so I can share with the staff. You're saying kind of reorganizing a word wall to use the components of a word. So like a prefixes section, a root word section, and a suffixes section.
Because those don't change with the story.
Right,
Those
that
are
would be
fun.
awesome. That's a great suggestion. And again, we already have the word walls, so we would just have to change how we organize them. So it wouldn't be as a huge shift. We're not starting from nothing, we're just making small changes. That's a great suggestion as well. Anything else you guys want to share in any of these categories? Anything we can celebrate with the staff?
We saw that students were very comfortable. It was obvious that it wasn't their first day using the annotations. They were very comfortable with them.
That's great. Anything else?
And the annotations were there for the students to use, and they again agreed that they were very comfortable. I felt like there was a lot of anchor charts around the room. I think that there's that uncomfortableness of that. Some teachers want students to have their own, and you don't want to force them to have. And I think sometimes that's that feeling of, gosh, I don't want to force them to. I want them to have their own. And then there's others that feel like, no, we need them to have this because some don't own it. And I think that's hard. I think it's an individual thing. But I think that having something is better than having nothing. And whichever it is, it's better than nothing. But I think that it was evident that they were definitely working. And I also think that students were engaged. Your students were hardworking, and I think that the teachers were also very engaged in this process as well.
Thank you. We would definitely share that. And like we were having a conversation about how we struggled with that, and that was one of the main reasons we left that bottom box open. Is we gave them a place to start, but that bottom box on our anchor chart says you have this ability to do it how you want. This is where you get to grow and stretch. We're going to move on to teacher actions. So in these 6 rooms, our first 3 categories, they saw 6 out of 6. Is this you guys right here? So the first one was complex text, then text analysis, and then purpose. And it's very exciting that we got a 6 out of 6 with purpose, because that's something we stress during each PLC, is why are we asking them to read it again? Because when we first rolled this out, they don't even read it one time, they're not gonna read it a second time or a third time. and we really dug deep and found ways to give them a purpose that they could really annotate for and attack the text. So we're excited to see that. The next one is chunking. So 4 out of the 6 classrooms annotating the text, supports and scaffolds, which is a 3 out of 6, and then vocabulary experiences. So do you guys have anything to share evidence-wise that we can talk about or wonderings?
So we were talking about, okay, so the 4 is support and scaffolds, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So then,
It was because we weren't sure if it was their first read. So because when you're reading it for the first time, you're not necessarily going to scaffold yet. You're probably focusing on your annotations first. And then after that, you're going to break down the text into, maybe you're gonna do a main idea graphic organizer, or you're gonna do, different ways to analyze the text for depth. So we weren't sure if it was because it was the first time they were reading it, so, and that's why they may not have had any scaffolding things going on.
Okay.
yeah, one of our wonderings that we were talking about too was about vocabulary and how, vocabulary is usually enacted on the spot. We did see some intentional, where the teacher pointed out that they really wanted them to know this word. And then in one of the rooms I went in, she asked multiple times, is there something you don't understand? Does everybody understand what's going on? Does anybody have any questions? And she could kind of answer some vocabulary related questions there. And so we were talking about when you choose a complex text, whether it's by yourself or with your team, how can you choose intentional words to point out to make sure that, because vocabulary should be one of those things, unless they're just reading for the gist and you're not having a conversation about it yet, should be one of those things that is pointed out. If it's complex text, there should be vocabulary words in there, and there should be a discussion. So how can you make sure if they're not able to figure out that there's a word they don't know, and they're not willing to, they might recognize the word, but they may not know what it is. How can you point that out to them, or how can you lead them to realizing that?
Intentional planning with vocabulary is definitely a place we can grow. And there's lots of different strategies that we're picking out and learning that will definitely be useful for that. Is there anything else you guys would like to share before we move on?
I'm sorry, what was the third 100? The
Purpose.
okay.
So the last category is student actions. And I'm gonna come back here so you guys can kind of get an understanding of what each represents. The first is complex text. The second is purpose. Third is discussion. Then chunking and annotating, and finally text evidence. So I noticed the same kind of trend that some classrooms intentionally plan for discussion. I know that because I planned a couple of the lessons with them, but you might not have seen it, and that's okay because this is just a snapshot. And then other classrooms had perfect opportunity for a discussion, but because it wasn't intentionally planned, it wasn't a natural thing for the teacher to say, we're gonna talk about this now. So you saw this perfect opportunity and you just wanted to say, talk to your friend, but we couldn't do that. And so I'd like to see what you guys have to say, any kind of evidences or wonderings you have for student actions.
I think where the rating was 50%. I think that was for collaborative discussion. It was the same thing you said. There was opportunity for them to open it up, even if you're just talking to a shoulder partner or at your table. But because we didn't see it, we weren't able to give them the points for that at all. But they definitely know how to annotate. They're definitely annotating. Some of them are doing it different ways, which is great because you left it open for them. But they definitely knew what they were doing, and I went and talked to one of the students and said, oh, what is that? Why is there a wow there? And he was able to tell me, and he was sitting by himself, and he was able to tell me that, that wow is because polar bears can weigh up to 1,200 pounds. So he was able to, so they know what they're doing.
He had
It's
that
natural. Oh
connection.
yeah, they all have the connection there. So it was good to see that they definitely have annotations now.
That's great. That's very positive feedback we can share with the teachers. Anything else? So, go ahead.
We were kind of wondering when an appropriate time would be for chunking. When should we allow the students to take ownership of the chunking? Because it's very teacher heavy, and probably rightly so, because the students aren't aware of, you know, the teacher's gonna chunk each paragraph or the word problem, but then you're gonna have some students that can go paragraph by paragraph, or even take a paragraph and, you know, be able to process a couple of sentences, and how do I how do I know that I understand this, you know? But for students to be chunking, it's really the teachers that are chunking it for them.
So
you know?
this was a huge discussion with the 4th and 5th grade team, because they departmentalize and I get to spend a lot more time with them. One of the things was, I feel like I'm doing this for them, and they're 4th and 5th graders. I want them to do this. So we talked about how this is year 1, and they haven't heard these words before, and I said, why do you want them to chunk? And they were talking about the same thing you said. They need to be able to understand whether they got that paragraph or they don't know. They don't know what they're talking about. So we talked about something called a hashtag summary, because we didn't want them to have to stop and really think and like get bogged down, especially with testing. It's a time test. So in 5th grade, they use this with almost every passage, and it's awesome to see, is you hashtag, the hashtag summary is supposed to be like a 3-word summary. So they need to be very brief, and they really need to get the main point. And as the teacher's modeling or monitoring, she looks at those hashtag summaries to see if they're anywhere near what they're supposed to be. So we're trying to give them that model of when to chunk, and so we do cluster here, so our advanced class now only does it every 2 paragraphs, but it is something we had to model. So we're hoping now that this group of 4th graders, when they come to 5th grade, the first time we give them a passage, we're hoping to see at least a few hashtag summaries, but it was something we had to model a lot first, and we still don't have that answer in the younger grades.
Right.
So like in 3rd grade, we're still really doing that for them.
Right.
So if you guys have any suggestions,
No, I mean, that's
it's
what-
a wondering that we've had as well.
I saw the hashtag summaries, and I do it with GBQs in 5th grade too. But I think a hard thing with the hashtag summaries is they want to do something silly.
Yeah.
To get a main idea in a summary doesn't like I saw today even hashtag ew, but ew doesn't really give me a detail or a main idea. You know,
Correct.
it connected with something in you. It's a basic annotation, so when I do the hashtag summaries, I make sure to say they have to be 3 to 5 words.
And
Right.
that should be perfect for the teacher to stop and say, I
Right.
understand
It's a
that
great
this
example.
looks like an annotation, but it doesn't look like
Right.
a hashtag summary. Can you give me a hashtag summary? Like that's why I think this process is great for our school and probably for your guys' students, because we see their thinking. So we know they think this is gross, but standards align. Do we know if they know that main idea?
Right.
So it's just a great conversation starter that we like, and that's a good suggestion I'll share with them.
But I was thinking about the chunking while you're talking it too, because it's not just chunking paragraphs, but you know, when they start doing the close reads on their own, like they get a story and in their brain they say, okay, I'm gonna read this once and do this. I'm gonna read this twice and do this. I'm gonna read this the 3rd time and do this. Once they get in the habit, but then that kind of worries me on an FSA standpoint, because if they're trying to read a story 3 times for 3 different purposes and answer the questions and annotate the answer choices,
So that was the first.
this
I
is
think
the first
that
year
was,
we're gonna see that.
and that was the first thing the teachers gave pushback with. Was when we came from DPLC the first time when we told them this process. Already we were like, this is a time test. You know, we're preparing for this
But
standards
it's
based,
true.
but this is a time test. And so one of the ways that we tried to combat that is we make a point to say this is a close read. And we taught our kids the difference between what a close read is and what a read is. So like we say we are going to read this 3 times for 3 different purposes. Where when we have a text that we're reading multiple days, or we just have a text that we're using to answer questions with, we don't call it a close read. We still annotate, we still might read different parts, but we really stress in the classroom, this one right here is the close read. And then we'll have kids say, is this a close read? And I'm like, no. No, it's just a regular read. Can we annotate? Yes. So that was, and I didn't even think about that, because this is my first year outside of the classroom. So I didn't think, I lost that pressure of, you know, we have to prepare them. So I was like, they'll be fine. But then all the teachers was like, no, they're not. We're teaching them something, it's gonna be a habit. So that was kind of our way to say, okay, this is a close read strategy. This one we're just reading.
I even worry now, even on one read with doing some of the annotations just take them a while.
The summaries took forever when we first started them. Now they're becoming more natural, but it did take a long time. It will be interesting to get the feedback after testing.
Definitely.
And this
because
is why
it's on a
close read,
computer.
and this is why, like, they tell us all the time at DPLC that close reads cannot be every single time you
Yes.
visit the text.
Right.
Or every single
and it's
lesson
gonna
you
make
do.
them a deeper reader on a regular read.
Right.
And that's the point of it. But I think that's hard for a kid to dip, well, I'm reading, but, let me just read it.
We got big pushback with math teachers because they felt like every math word problem could be a complex text, especially on a test. You
Yeah.
usually get a graphic, you usually get vocabulary, and we got huge pushback of, we can't teach them to do this. And so that's why I think it was group 1, we saw the cube strategy being used. That was a strategy they were already using, we combined it with the close reading, but again, we do intentionally tell them, this problem
This
is
one's a
going to
close
be a
read.
close read. And so they kind of, sit up a little bit straighter and they're like, they know what that means now.
Yeah.
So that was just one way we tried to solve that,
That's
you
great.
know.
I'll
And
take
you-
that back.
Yeah, I'm like,
And I do think it kind of goes back to the comment someone made about the kids deciding the chunking. Because some of the kids, they will want to read the passage without doing any annotations. Some kids will want to look at the questions first, then go back and find that answer kind of and start annotating as well too. So I think that's where the differentiation does come in, but when you're teaching them the method of annotating, it's very structured and strategic until, they're independent enough to do the annotations on their own.
And their brains begin to annotate
Yeah.
as well.
Mhm.
It just makes them a deeper reader. But even as adults, some of us look at the questions
Right.
first, some of us read the story.
Absolutely. I am going to open up now. Is there anything anybody else wants to share? Did you want to say anything about the annotations? Did we kind of talk
So-
about it already?
at North Lake, we're still kind of struggling with, as far as the DPLC team. Do we want to, because we started out rolling out school-wide annotations, but then it's still like a topic of discussion, and we keep reminding ourselves this is a 3-year process, this is growth. Like, we'll kind of start seeing what other schools are doing and figure out how this works. Because in K1 and 2, we thought about, okay, maybe we could just roll out a few of the annotations, not all of them. But then it's like some classrooms annotate differently than others. And then if students are jumping from school to school, no CPS, which happens very often, how well will they be able to adapt? So that's kind of like in the back of our head, it's still an unanswered thing. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, seeing it in play here and going into 3 different grades and seeing those annotations, I do like the idea of school-wide annotations because it saves a lot of time when they get into the upper grades. That conversation is already rolling. Oh, we're already talking about connections. We're already talking about unknown words. It's already, that process is already so taught. So I really liked that. I liked that in all rooms, the same discussion was going on at a higher level.
And we had the same conversation. We did not leave that first DPLC till like 4:30 because we were like, are we gonna do this or are we not gonna do it?
Yes.
And really what saved us, I shared with you about Miss Adams, she didn't wanna do it, was that empty box. We're not telling you you have to do this. We're not telling you this is the end all be all, but this is a starting point. So we never told the kids to do wow, but that child was so amazed at whatever he read, he just wrote the word wow. So we're teaching them this is a way to interact with the text. The cool thing about this, I tell teachers to model using these because I don't have to ask the child a question when I see this. I can use it as a teaching point.
That's
If
what
I'm
saying,
walking
the conversation's
around
already going.
and I see 4 different students with the same word circled, I'm gonna address a whole group because I know that's a majority of my kiddos. I need to really talk about that word. And it's just a fun thing to really see.
I think it's tough to break teacher habits too, because maybe teachers have been for 5 years now circling other things.
Yes.
So now it's like
Yes.
they tell them, oh, circle this. Oh, but circle unknown word, and then it's just, I'm one of them.
I
Circle
will
and box and.
I will definitely say that at Lake George, when we pulled this out, we probably had 10 new teachers to Lake George. So it was helpful in that area because they were willing to like go with the flow. And here we're very, very close. Like we share things from grade level to grade level, and it just worked, it fit with our school family. And it might not fit with some or all, but it was so nice to see when we rolled it out. They're like, yeah, and they made bookmarks, they made posters, they really jumped on board. So I could see if you had some teachers doing certain things that were hesitant, it would just be on how you rolled it out.
I think the conversation will be different now that we saw it.
Well, and to have that empty box at the bottom saying
Yeah, and
that
I even heard a kid
this
say
is
I
a
added
starting
one.
point. Yeah.
I added a side
This is
page
a
'cause this
starting
reading set.
point. And like if you as a teacher feel like you want to put a heart next to a connection,
Yeah.
you can add that annotation in your lesson without,
And it can be different each lesson.
yeah.
And I think that it's similar to when we rolled out laptops. So when schools went digital, very similar thing happened because everything had to be digital, and then everybody started saying, "Oh, but every lesson has to be digital." And then what happens is then instruction starts to take a little bit of a nosedive because everything can't be digital. And then what in turn happens is you start to see a little bit of a decline, and that's what you're concerned about, is a little bit of a decline because students are going to take too much time and they're going to spend more time figuring out what the codes are rather than actually the process of being able to read. And that kind of took place with the digital process, where it was more about, actually learning the tools than it was actually learning the what you wanted them to learn. And I think that just goes along with anything that we start that is this big. That's going to happen, I think, initially, but in the end, you will get to the actual product, the actual academia that you want students to get to. But I think it's just a process that we go through.
Yeah.
I think that's why we said too, it's something we roll out at the beginning of a year.
Yes.
During that get to know you game, annotate some,
And when
something.
when we did first roll it out, I'll share with you that when we would go in as coaches to observe or as administrators to observe, we noticed that teachers were teaching the annotations, and that's not what we wanted. So we wanted them to teach the standard through annotations. So we had to model that in PLCs and professional development because we did not want teachers to say, okay, you see this star, that means this.
Right.
We didn't have them go step by step to show them why we did it with each one. We had to model how to do that, but with addressing a standard. And it comes through modeling first. That's why we use that teacher action so heavily, because we wanted to show them how we could get the kids to do it without thinking, oh man, what was it when I have a connection? What symbol do I use? We wanted it to be more
Once
natural.
they see you do it enough times,
Yes.
they just are, and they're doing it before they even know they're doing it.
It was really cool to see. It was a great process to roll out at the beginning of the year, though. That was
Right, I think that's our
Maybe that's
game
what it was.
plan is beginning of the year.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you. This was our first external visit. We really enjoyed the feedback. I'm really excited to share, and we've got great strategies. We found areas of growth, but we also were able to take away solutions. So it's nice to say to the staff, okay, vocabulary, but here's something we can do. Or chunking, here's something we can do. So I really wanted to thank you guys, and
Thank you for having us.